Do you believe what almost everyone believes? That life finally changes the day you hit $100,000. But the real problem was never the 100 grand. It's what that number does to your head. It's so far away that some part of you has already decided it's not for you. So you never start. There's a much smaller number that flips that switch. Here's what nobody tells you. And I should tell you why I'm the one saying it. I learned all of this the hard way. After losing my health, my job, my marriage, and nearly everything I'd ever saved. The number that turned my life around wasn't 100,000. It was the first one that proved to me I could rebuild. I'll get to that, but first, the trap. Let's start with the goal everyone hands you, $100,000. The point, they say, where your money finally starts working for you. Watch the math, nobody runs for you. If you put away $500 a month and earn a solid 7% in the market, reaching 100,000 takes you about 11 years. 11 years. So your brain does something very logical. It looks at that distance, decides it's hopeless, and quietly files the whole thing under, not for me. And then you do nothing. The goal didn't motivate you. It paralyzed you. And this part should make you angry. Most people chasing that number aren't even in the game yet. In Bankrate's 2026 report, only 30% of Americans said they'd pay a major unexpected expense, a $1,000 emergency room visit, a car repair, straight from savings. Everyone else would need another way out, regular cash flow, a credit card, borrowing, cutting spending, or just scrambling. And nearly 1 in 4 have no emergency savings at all. Think about that. We're telling people to train for a marathon when they can't yet walk to the mailbox. No wonder they quit before the first step. So forget the 100,000. For now, genuinely, let it go. The first number that actually changes your life is $10,000. And let me be honest about what that number is. It's not some magic scientific line. It's the first target big enough to feel real, but still close enough that you can actually start. It has nothing to do with getting rich. It has everything to do with getting out. Let me kill the fantasy first, because honesty is the whole point of this channel. At $10,000, your money does almost nothing. Park it at 4%, and it earns about $400 a year. That's $33 a month. Even at a generous 8%, it's $800 a year. If you came here for compound interest magic, 10,000 doesn't have it. The money is not the point. So what is? 3 things money can't show you on a chart. 1. Security. Now, how far 10,000 goes depends on you. Against the average American household spending, it's about a month and a half of expenses. On a leaner budget, it can be 3 months or more. Either way, it's enough to turn a whole category of emergencies from a crisis into just a problem. And the research here is worth hearing. Vanguard surveyed more than 12,000 investors and found that having at least $2,000 in emergency savings was associated with 21% higher financial well-being. Add 3 to 6 months of expenses on top of that, and the association climbed to 34%. In their data, emergency savings was the single strongest predictor of financial well-being, not income, savings. 2. The end of survival mode. When you've got nothing behind you, every decision is made in fear. You take the bad job, you stay where you're miserable. You can't say no. A buffer doesn't just sit in an account. It changes the decisions you're allowed to make. Picture the most ordinary disaster. Your car dies on a Tuesday, or a pipe lets go in the house. With nothing saved, that's a credit card at 20-something%, a debt that trails you for months, maybe a missed shift because you couldn't get to work. With 10,000 behind you, the exact same breakdown is a bad afternoon and a phone call. Nothing about the car changed, everything about you did. That's what the buffer actually buys, not interest, but the ability to absorb life without sliding backwards. 3. And this is the one nobody talks about, proof. But I'll come back to that, because it's the whole game. Quick thing, now that you've seen what that 10,000 actually buys. If this is already more useful than one more lecture about reaching 100,000, do one small thing. Subscribe. This channel is real money, real math, no hype, and every subscriber tells YouTube to put it in front of one more person who's stuck right where you might be. Okay, so how do you actually get there? And this is where it gets almost insulting. $500 a month kept in a plain savings account with no investing, no risk, no return needed. And you're there in 20 months. Can't do 500? 300 a month gets you there in under 3 years. 200 in a little over 4. No tricks, no market, just the number divided by what you set aside. So let me ask you the real question. If the math is this simple, a number you could have worked out on a napkin, why are so many people still stuck? Because the math was never the problem. You already knew you should save. You didn't need me for that. The thing standing in your way isn't a formula. It's a quiet little belief that you won't actually follow through. And a goal like 100,000 only feeds that belief because it's so far off, it confirms what you already suspect, that this isn't for people like you. It's not your fault. You were handed the wrong number. Let's hand you the right one. And the key to actually act on it. The key is 2 moves, and neither one is try harder. The first move is to automate it. Willpower is a terrible savings plan because it runs out by Friday. So you take it out of the equation entirely. 1 automatic transfer, the day you get paid, before you can even touch it. You don't decide to save every month. You decide once. The second move is to start with a win so small it's impossible to fail. Not 500. Start at $25 if that's what's real for you. Because your first goal isn't 10,000, it's your first 200. Then your first 1,000. At $250 a month, that first 2,000 shows up in 8 months. And remember, 2,000 is the number Vanguard tied to that 21% difference. Your first real win is also anchored in the data. Now maybe you're thinking 10,000 is too small to bother with. That real wealth gets built with big numbers, not $25 transfers. I'd push back on that, hard. The $25 was never the point. The unbroken streak is. $100 saved every month for a year quietly beats a $1,000 burst you never repeat, because one builds an identity and the other builds a memory. You're not trying to impress anyone with the size of the deposit. You're trying to prove something to the one person who stopped believing you, yourself. Now, why do those small wins matter so much more than the dollars? There's a concept psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief that you're capable, built not from pep talks, but from evidence. Every automatic transfer that goes through is a piece of proof. You stop telling yourself, I'm bad with money, because the receipts say otherwise. That's the third thing 10,000 buys you, proof. You're not building an account. You're building a new story about who you are. I want to tell you something personal, because I learned this the hard way. For most of my career, I did everything I'm telling you to do. I saved automatically every month, but I never felt any of this. I had the means, so I just did it mechanically. Money wasn't my focus. I figured retirement was handled, and I stopped thinking about it. Then it all came apart, a cancer diagnosis. I lost my job, then a divorce. Almost everything I built was tied up in property, so I had to sell it and split it. It took 12 years to get my health back. No one would hire me, so I started my own business, and my savings burned through fast. One day I looked, and I was at zero, borrowing from friends, genuinely afraid of how I'd ever retire. So I started over. The business slowly started bringing in money. I was already living on nothing, so I kept it that way, paid back every debt, and put a little aside. And this is the part I never saw coming. Watching that balance climb week after week did something money had never done for me before. Every small win gave me back a confidence I'd lost. My whole mindset turned, and that turn fed the business too. At 62, I started traveling again. I met someone. My life had momentum again. Saving that money didn't just rebuild my finances, it rebuilt me. It's always easier to spend today than to save, but the reward for saving shows up later, as security, and as a balance that finally grows on its own. Psychologists call that delayed gratification. I just call it the best trade I ever made. That's why the number, 100,000, 10,000, whatever, barely matters at the start. The starting point is you and your consistency. And consistency builds a staircase. Watch what happens once the habit is automatic. At $500 a month, your first 10,000, sitting safe in savings, takes about 20 months. But your second 10,000 is different. You keep that first 10 safe. That's your buffer. It stays liquid. But now the next dollars can finally start working. At $500 a month, invested at an assumed 7% return, your next 10,000 shows up in about 19 months instead of 20. Not a dramatic jump, but for the first time the money is pulling a little of the weight with you. The honest reason why? It's not mainly the interest. It's that you're not fighting yourself anymore. The transfer is automatic. The identity is set. You've become the kind of person who saves, so the next step costs you almost no effort. And this, only now, is where that 100,000 quietly comes back into view. Once the habit holds and your money is invested, that impossible number stops being a fantasy and becomes a matter of when. That's the point where the growth finally starts to feel visible, where the returns finally start feeling big enough to notice. We'll break that exact moment down in the next video. But notice what actually flipped the switch. It was never the 100,000. It was 10, because 10,000 changed what you believe. So I'm not going to tell you to go get rich. I'm going to tell you to do one small thing today. Open your banking app, the same one that gives you that little jolt of dread, and set up one automatic transfer. Anything, $25. Then, pick your first win, 2,000. That's it. That's the whole move. The math will take care of the rest, because you've finally taken care of the part the math can't. If this gave you a different way to see that number, do me that one free favor. Subscribe, hit like, and ring the bell. The next video is the staircase, what really happens at 20,000, and how the climb keeps getting faster. I'll see you there.